Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be diving in today.
Today, we're taking a really close look at some insights from Marc Ghafoori, the founder and CEO of AlphaTooth.
Right. Focusing on event procurement, efficient procurement.
Exactly. And, it's not just about nickel and dining, is it?
No, far from it. Ghafoori's point is it's more fundamental. It's about improving how your events actually run.
And freeing up resources, which means better experiences for attendees.
Precisely. And Ghafoori really nails the core problem right at the start.
Which is?
Well, that the whole sourcing process for events, it often gets really bogged down. It's inefficient, sometimes confusing.
And full of those hidden costs everyone dreads.
Exactly. And he points out when that behind-the-scenes stuff becomes a drag, it hits the event's finances hard, whether it's for associations or corporate planners.
Yeah, he backs this up, doesn't he? He brings in some heavy hitters.
He does, mentions firms like McKinsey, PwC, EY.
And what are they finding?
Consistently, they're seeing organizations lose like 3 to 4% of their external spend.
Just gone. Due to bad processes.
Pretty much. Inefficiencies, mistakes, those sneaky fees you mentioned, value leakage, they call it.
Okay, let's make that real. 3 to 4%. On $1 million event, what are we talking?
Tens of thousands of dollars, potentially just vanishing because of how things are being bought.
Wow, okay.
And Ghafoori connects this right back to the event world. He highlights sources like TSNN and PCMA.
Yeah?
They're reporting exhibitors getting really concerned about rising costs, service charges creeping up.
Things like drayage, exclusive vendor markups.
Exactly. And exhibitors are looking hard at their ROI because of it. So yeah, Ghafoori's tackling a very current, very real pain point.
Right. So our plan today is to unpack Ghafoori's key ideas from his video.
We'll look at the financial hit from inefficient procurement.
Making sure we separate out the obvious direct costs from the sneakier indirect ones.
Yep. And we definitely need to talk about that gray territory in RFPs. That's a big one Ghafoori raises.
Definitely. And then we'll get into his proposed solutions, the deal progression modules.
Sounds good. The goal really is to show how good procurement isn't just about saving cash.
It's about protecting the attendee experience.
And making sure you get real value and agility from your vendors.
Okay, so where does Ghafoori start? With the scale of the problem.
Yeah, he kicks off with a pretty fundamental point. You can't manage what you can't see. Simple as that.
Meaning, if your sourcing is all over the place, emails here, spreadsheets there.
Exactly. No central tracking, no standard way to compare proposals.
Yeah.
You're flying blind.
And when you're flying blind, money just sort of evaporates.
That's where he brings back that McKinsey finding, that 3 to 4% of external spend wasted.
On inefficiencies, transaction mistakes, value leakage.
Let's put some real numbers on that again.
Please do.
Ghafoori uses a great example. Say an organization spends maybe $5 million a year across all its events. Venues, AV, logistics, that 3 to 4%, that's potentially over $150,000 loss every year, just from process flaws.
That's staggering.
It really is. So the insight isn't just procurement costs money, it's that these flaws act like a hidden tax, up to 4% on your whole budget.
Money that could be going into the actual event experience.
Precisely. Better speakers, nicer food, cooler tech.
And it gets even more specific, right? He mentions an EY analysis.
Yeah, focused on corporate event travel.
And they found
that just by bringing in automation, digital booking tools, organizations could cut those travel costs by 18 to 22%.
18 to 22%. How?
Mostly by stopping duplications, booking the same flight twice by mistake, cutting down on manual errors, and crucially, avoiding those last-minute price hikes when things get booked late because procurement was slow.
Right. So the big takeaway here from Ghafoori is
that targeted improvements aren't just marginal gains. They can free up serious budget.
Budget you can then reinvest where it counts. Attendee engagement, better on-set experiences.
Exactly. It's about shifting resources strategically.
Okay, let's switch perspective. What about the event organizers themselves? Are they feeling this pinch?
Oh, absolutely. Ghafoori points to surveys showing budget pressures and rising service costs are like top concerns across the board.
I bet. He mentioned exhibit marketers specifically.
Yeah, something like 88% worry most about managing their budgets.
Wow, 88%.
And 82% blame those ballooning show service fees. Drayage, you mentioned it, exclusive vendor pricing.
Yeah, that mandatory in-house AV at a huge markup. Or crazy cancellation policies.
Ghafoori touches on all that. Those unnecessary hurdles that just add cost and frustration.
He had an example, didn't he, from a TSNN report?
He did. Exhibitors getting hit mid-contract with extra charges.
What?
Things like electricity, forklifts, cleaning, overtime labor, stuff they thought was included or clearly outlined in the RFP or contract.
But it wasn't.
Nope. Surprise.
And these aren't small amounts, right? He mentioned an admin fee example.
Yeah, an exhibitor suddenly seeing a 10% admin fee tacked onto almost everything, just labeled miscellaneous.
Ouch. And because it's late in the game.
They have no choice but to pay it. No leverage left.
But Ghafoori's point is, this is often preventable.
Totally. If the procurement team had been more systematic up front, clarifying scope, getting transparent pricing, could have saved those exhibitors a lot.
So boiling it down, what does Ghafoori see as inefficient procurement in action?
It's a few key things. Not shopping around properly, not nailing down the specifics, leaving room for those hidden fees.
Making decisions too late so you get hit with rush charges.
Yep. And not having a solid backup plan. What happens if vendor A falls through or jacks up their price last minute?
And the end result of all that.
Constant risk of blowing the budget. And often, as Ghafoori says, you don't realize how bad it is until it's way too late to fix.
Okay, let's dig into costs. Ghafoori makes a distinction, right? Direct versus indirect.
Yes, and it's a really crucial one. Not all the financial damage is obvious on an invoice.
Some costs are right there in black and white. Line items.
Those are the direct costs. Things like cancellation penalties, explicit fees, easy to spot.
But then there are the indirect costs.
Right, the ones that sort of silently drain resources, wasted staff time, lower quality outcomes.
But both hurt the bottom line.
Absolutely. Both damage the event's financial health, as Ghafoori stresses.
Okay, let's start with direct costs. The visible ones. What examples does Ghafoori give?
Well, the most obvious are those hidden or junk fees we talked about. Service charges, admin fees popping up.
Things like pull prep or restock labor, I've seen those.
Exactly. And mandatory gratuities. Those can add 10, 15, even 25% onto base prices.
And Ghafoori mentioned research suggesting these surprise costs can inflate budgets by how much?
By up to 27%, often because the initial RFPs just weren't clear enough to prevent vendors slipping them in.
27% is huge. What else falls under direct costs?
Missed early bird discounts. Procurement takes too long. You missed the deadline for that cheaper venue rate. Boom, direct cost increase.
Or needing something last minute. Rigging, better Wi-Fi.
Yeah, you could pay 50% more, maybe even higher, than if you'd planned it properly up front. That's a direct hit.
Penalties too, right? Late payments or cancellations.
Definitely. Ghafoori points out if your RFP or decision process drags on, you might lose your venue hold.
And end up scrambling for a pricier alternative.
Or, say, a sponsor pulls out late because your pipeline management wasn't tight. Those attrition fees in the contract, big direct cost.
And rush fees, everyone's nightmare.
Right. Ghafoori notes even simple graphics can cost 15–20% more if ordered within 2 weeks of the event.
Because of expedited labor costs.
Yep. And if procurement is finalizing everything at the 11th hour, those rush fees are just unavoidable. They pile up quickly.
Okay, now the indirect costs. The hidden drains, as Ghafoori calls them. Less obvious, but damaging.
Maybe even more damaging in the long run. First up, labor inefficiency and rework.
Meaning?
Staff spending time fixing mistakes, chasing quotes that should have been clear, renegotiating vague terms. It's wasted effort.
He brings back McKinsey here. Finding procurement teams spend, what was it?
Up to 30% more time just correcting errors when processes aren't standardized.
30%. Think what else they could be doing with that time.
Exactly. Focusing on attendees, finding sponsors, critical stuff.
Which leads to the next indirect cost. Missed opportunities and lost time.
Right. A slow, messy RFP process means you might lose out on the best vendors or special deals.
Especially for popular dates, the good venues go fast.
For sure. Slow approvals mean you settle for second best, which might even cost more. That's a lost opportunity cost.
And quality shortfalls. This one sounds serious.
It really is. Ghafoori warns if the team's swamped by messy procurement, vendor vetting might get skipped or rushed.
So you end up with dodgy AV. Unreliable catering.
Could happen. And bad attendee experiences damage your event's reputation.
Which hits future revenue. Fewer sponsors, fewer exhibitors.
But that's a real, though intangible financial hit down the road.
Lastly, scope creep. The silent budget killer.
Oh yeah. Vague RFPs or contracts are an open invitation for it.
Little requests start adding up. Better staging for the speaker, upgraded lighting, extra branding.
Exactly. Each one seems small, but Ghafoori points out they can collectively add tens of thousands to the bill, plus all the stress of managing those last-minute changes.
So summing up this cost section, Why is tackling both direct and indirect costs so critical?
Ghafoor is very clear. Planners need to protect their margins while delivering great experiences. Direct costs hit the budget immediately.
Well, indirect costs slowly bleed resources and burn out staff.
Right, so you absolutely have to address both to stay profitable and keep your team sane.
Okay, let's move on to RFPs. Ghafoori talks about this gray territory. What's the tension there?
It's that constant struggle, isn't it? How much detail do you put in an RFP?
You want to be specific enough to avoid hidden fees.
But not so rigid that you stifle any creativity or innovation from the vendor.
It's a fine line.
A very fine line. And Ghafoori emphasizes that ambiguity, that gray area, is where hidden costs thrive.
He references McKinsey again here.
Yeah, saying specification errors and lack of standard templates are top reasons for unplanned costs later on.
Can you give some examples of that vague RFP language Ghafoori mentions?
Sure, like an AV request saying, all necessary AV for 1,000 attendees.
But not specifying mics, staging, lighting for recording.
Exactly. So the vendor quotes the bare minimum. Then every actual need becomes an expensive upgrade.
Looks cheap initially, costs us a fortune eventually.
Precisely. Or an F&B quote for 500 people that forgets bar staff costs, or extra service hours you find out the day before.
And pay premium rates. Ouch.
Or a trade show GSC quote that includes padding but not the actual carpet. You're scrambling on-site, paying through the nose for carpet and labor.
These sound painfully familiar. Ghafoori mentioned a PwC analysis too.
Yeah, on big public projects, finding 65% of cost overruns came from spec gaps and changes after the contract was signed.
And he says the same applies to events.
Absolutely. Unclear scope up front just leads to constant costly changes later. Vendors know they can charge more for variations.
But Ghafoori also warns against being too rigid, right?
Yeah.
You need some flexibility.
Yes, strategic flexibility. Because an overly prescriptive RFP can actually block cost savings or creative solutions.
How so?
Well, maybe the venue has a digital signage option that saves printing costs. But if your RFP is too narrow...
They won't even suggest it.
Exactly. Procurement experts note that micro-specifying everything limits the vendor's ability to propose better processes or bundled discounts. Give them some room, and they might tailor a better solution.
Ghafoori had an idea for managing this, didn't he? Contingency scope items.
Right. Build it into the RFP. Say if attendance jumps by X%, the price adjusts based on a pre-agreed formula.
So you acknowledge uncertainty, but avoid totally reopening negotiations later.
Exactly. That bit of plan flexibility prevents those, oh, by the way, surprises.
So the sweet spot is...
Ghafoori stresses nail down the critical cost drivers. Labor rates, major equipment, standard tasks be detailed there, but also have a section inviting innovative ideas or outlining contingencies. And always, always make them itemize costs for everything.
So you can compare apples to apples and see where the money's going.
Precisely. Structure to avoid hidden fees, but enough openness for vendor ingenuity, as one manager put it.
Get the best of both worlds. Transparency and innovation.
That's the goal.
Okay, let's talk solutions. Ghafoori proposes these deal progression modules. What's the big idea behind them?
He's advocating for a multi-pronged approach. It's about stamping out inefficiencies, getting scope clarity, and making sure you can pivot quickly if needed.
These modules are like pillars for a smarter procurement strategy.
Yeah, think of them that way. Designed to proactively stop those financial leaks we've been talking about.
All right, module 1.
Centralized sourcing in a unified dashboard.
Why? What's the logic?
To stop the chaos, basically. Avoid fragmentation, missed deadlines, data scattered everywhere. When you're juggling multiple RFPs and vendors,
Things get lost.
easily. So Ghafoori suggests using a dedicated platform or even shared tools like Monday.com, Asana, maybe specific procurement software.
The key is having one place to log everything. Vendor info, RFPs, status, costs, next steps.
Yes, and critically, giving controlled access to stakeholders. Finance, marketing, breaks down silos.
And the expected result of this central hub.
Ghafoori believes it gives you real-time visibility. Spotlight proposals instantly. Compare pricing easily.
Which cuts direct costs by catching fees early.
And indirect costs by saving staff time hunting for info. Win-win.
Okay, module 2.
Pipeline velocity tracking and alert systems.
Sounds serious. What's the goal?
To stop deals getting stuck, prevent those long delays that lead to lost opportunities or rush fees.
How does Ghafoori suggest implementing this?
First, map out your RFP stages. Issued, proposals in, negotiating, contracts signed, etc. Then track how long deals typically spend in each stage. find the average.
And then set targets. Like negotiations shouldn't take more than 10 days.
Exactly. And here's the key. Set up automated alerts. If a deal is stuck in one stage past the target time,
Bing. Someone needs to follow up.
or even trigger moving to your backup vendor. Ghafoori mentions even simple tools like Google Docs can work here, using data validation and maybe a scoreboard to track progress.
So the benefit is early warning.
Yeah. Ghafoori says you flag stalled deals early, giving you time to react, escalate, or pivot. Fewer last-minute panics and premium charges.
Module 3 sounds familiar. Itemized RFP templates with built-in flex points.
Right, building on the earlier discussion. The goal here, according to Ghafoori, is fighting hidden fees while still allowing vendor creativity.
So develop standard templates for major categories: venue, GSC, F&B, AV.
Yes, templates that require itemized pricing for specific services, rigging, labor, power, the usual suspects.
But also include that flex proposal section.
Definitely. Encourage vendors to suggest alternatives or enhancements there, and include that contingency clause for things like attendance changes.
What's the outcome Ghafoori expects from this?
Fewer nasty surprises on the final bill. Vendors can pitch value adds, but they can't easily bury fees.
You lock down the main cost drivers, but still allow for innovative approaches.
That's the idea. Better control, better potential solutions.
Module 4 tackles negotiation, a negotiation playbook and real-time collaboration.
Yeah, this is about making the negotiation phase itself more efficient. Ghafoori wants to stop endless haggling and scope creep during talks.
How? What's the playbook involve?
Predefining your must-haves versus nice-to-haves, knowing your budget wiggle room, what can you trade off?
Okay.
Also, unifying internal feedback. Get marketing, finance, ops on the same page before negotiating. Avoid sending mixed signals to the vendor.
Makes sense. And the collaboration part.
Use shared docs or sourcing tools, Ghafoori suggests. Track changes and comments in real time so everyone sees what's happening.
Then set deadlines for negotiation.
Crucial. Set a firm date for a decision or moving on. Keeps the pressure on and maintains velocity.
What results does Ghafoori see from this structured negotiation?
Less time wasted in back and forth. High pipeline velocity maintained. You avoid caving on bad deals just because you're tired. And vendors respect your deadlines more if you're consistent and transparent.
Module 5, supplier scorecards and a preferred vendor ecosystem. This sounds like relationship building.
It is. Ghafoori's principle here is that trust and reliability reduce future problems and rework.
So after an event, you score the vendor on cost adherence, fee transparency, communication.
Exactly. Create scorecards. Maintain a list of preferred vendors based on performance. Revisit it regularly.
And engage those reliable vendors early. Standardize RFPs for them. Maybe negotiate volume discounts.
All of the above. Ghafoori also suggests actively asking vendors for cost-saving ideas, even holding post-event summits with key suppliers to discuss improvements.
The long-term benefit Ghafoori sees is
Stronger partnerships, less friction, fewer last-minute fee issues, more collaborative problem-solving.
plus potential discounts and stable pricing over time.
Right. Building that trusted ecosystem pays off.
Okay, the final module, number 6.
Continuous monitoring and post-mortem analysis.
Because the landscape keeps changing.
Exactly. Ghafoori stresses that one-off fixes aren't enough. You need ongoing learning.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
Comprehensive post-mortems after each event.
Yes. Compare actual spend to budget, category by category. Identify where the overruns happen, inefficiencies, scope creep.
And involve vendors in this,
Yeah.
especially those on multi-year contracts.
Absolutely. Give them feedback, work together on fixes. Also, analyze your pipeline data. Where there are bottlenecks. Why?
And look at any last-minute changes or rush fees. Could earlier triggers or better contract clauses prevent those next time?
Right. The key for Ghafoori is feeding all these lessons back into updating your RFP templates and procurement processes.
So the expected outcome is continuous improvement.
Exactly. Each event cycle refines your approach. Procurement stays agile, relevant. You stop making the same costly mistakes over and over, building resilience.
Okay, wrapping this all up. Ghafoori's core message about the impact of inefficient procurement seems pretty stark.
It really is. He emphasizes it's both the visible hits, penalties, fees, and those hidden drains like staff time, missed discounts, bad vendor choices.
And the potential loss is significant, that 3-4% or more of total spend he flags with McKinsey and EY data.
Which, as we said, can be huge sums of money walking out the door.
He's clear that both exhibitors and organizers feel the pain of rising costs.
Often driven by murky RFPs, endless negotiations, disjointed approvals.
But the good news is there are solutions. these structured approaches Ghafoori outlines.
Yeah, from centralized data to tracking pipeline velocity, ways to spot problems early and adapt.
And he really hammers home that balance in RFPs, clarity to avoid fees, but flexibility for innovation.
It's crucial. Plus, standardizing negotiation builds better supplier relations, and post-event analysis drives improvement.
He contrasts just letting mistakes happen again, like surprise labor costs,
with proactively building transparency and contingencies into your process.
So Ghafoori's bottom line is procurement isn't just admin.
Not at all. It's a strategic frontline for controlling finances, building partnerships, ensuring agility.
Because change is constant in events, right?
The only constant, as he says. A well-managed pipeline signals professionalism, builds vendor confidence.
And who benefits most in the end?
Ghafoori circles back to the attendees. When budgets are managed well, resources go into the experience, not wasted on bad contracts.
So his final takeaway is pretty forceful.
Absolutely. You just can't afford to ignore procurement inefficiencies. Doesn't matter how big or small your event is.
The lessons from consultants and real-world examples all point the same way.
Careful management, meticulous tracking. Don't let hidden fees or vague terms sink your budget.
And implementing Ghafoori's modules, centralizing data, automating, clarifying RFPs, tracking velocity,
leads to smoother negotiations, cost savings you can reinvest in the attendee experience, a more resilient, cost-efficient future.
Treat procurement strategically, not as an afterthought.
And you stop bleeding money, you build trust, and you deliver higher impact events.
A win-win, as Ghafoori says, for the organizer, partners,
and especially the attendees who get a better experience because every dollar is working smarter.
Now, if you're listening and thinking, okay, I want to do this, Ghafoori and AlphaTooth have resources, right?
They do. He mentions accompanying worksheets and workbooks that align with these ideas.
Where can people find those?
You can head directly to alphatooth.com to download them.
And they're free.
Completely free to download, adapt, use them however works best for you.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
A practical way to start implementing these strategies.
Definitely. Ghafoori really encourages people to grab them and start applying these principles.
So we'll leave you with that thought and a call to action inspired by Marc Ghafoori himself.
Take these ideas, these strategies.
Integrate them into how you plan and execute your events. And, as Ghafoori puts it so well, go out there and change the world of your events.